OK, let's talk about the King one more time. And I'm very pleased to welcome, I don't know if it's fair to describe him as an eco-activist. That's how I describe King Charles. Jim Dale, author of Whether or Not, the personal and commercial impacts of weather and climate. Jim, hello.
Hi, Nick. Good afternoon to you. I can describe me as an eco-friendly person. That's absolutely fine because why not? You should be looking after what's out there, what grows.
Okay. All right. Don't go off on one already. We're going to talk about the King. All right.
Go on, man. Let's talk about the King.
Happy Christmas to you. Okay.
Thank you. Same to you.
I'm a believer in free speech, but I think I side with John Rentoul from The Independent, who said, and I'm going to paraphrase this, but I know I'm not particularly wrong. He said, King Charles should keep his nose out of politics. That is what he is doing by discussing the issue. I think a lot of people listening to this will agree. What's your thoughts?
My thoughts are that the climate has become political because it's become so important, and 90% of people out there, give or take, recognise that, register it, and some are doing things about it. There is a core 10%, give or take, that are not. And
You're not quite answering the question there. It's about the King's engagement. I would challenge the 90%, by the way. But my question was, the King, by getting involved and potentially doing more harm than good to his cause, is playing politics. And as John Rentoul said, and many of my listeners saying, he should keep his nose out of it.
No, well, look, the Green King, he's
the Green King. There's a free beer in this.
He's had that title for a long, long time.
Sure.
Even before climate change became a burning issue.
Accepted.
And therefore, when he speaks to the nation, and I'm not a royalist in any shape or form, but when he speaks tomorrow, I'm sure that he will go back to his roots, go back to what he believes in, go back to what's important to him, and make that as part of his speech. I don't see there's a problem with this. It's not treading on toes necessarily.
Well, it is. That's the problem. Now, the reason is, look, I like someone who's got views. But, Jim, the reality is, when you are the constitutional monarch, and when, on the following day after your predecessor, his mother, died, he said, effectively, I paraphrase again, I will respect the Constitution. That is that the King is above politics and keeps his opinions to himself or in private conversations with the Prime Minister. And even then, he treads carefully. This is political. Even if he doesn't attack the government's policies, it's still political.
I think it's political on the edges. I think this is the point, Nick. I think most people, the vast majority, accept that something has to be done about the climate. Something has to happen. We've gone through a year of 2023 in about 6 days' time. We're going to be looking at as in the records, the warmest ever year globally on record. Now that stands on its own, but then you put all the other things that have happened with climate and weather through the year, and it's actually it's horrific. So look,
but that's
a little point.
Even if I accepted that, which I have a different view to you, but I am not a denier. Let's not waste our time going down that route.
I'm glad of that.
But the point I would make to you is that he speaks for the nation. His job is not to advise government on policy. It is not to enter into a political arena for two reasons. One, it's constitutionally unhelpful, and secondly, it is divisive. And as a monarch, the one thing you should be doing is choosing things that bind the country together. Despite your suggestion that 90% of the public believe this, Jim, I question that, but it's still not 100%.
No, but I'm just wondering what he's going to talk about without being...
Well, Queen Elizabeth managed it.
I mean, he could talk about homelessness, for example, and then straight away you're into politics. He could, if we go down the route of saying, OK, if he turns up tomorrow and says, we should all go and plant a tree, is that politics or is that not politics? Is that hugging a tree? Is it, what is it?
Well, his mother led a brilliant example. She never, ever entered this arena in her 70-year reign. In fact, it was 71 years, wasn't it? Her 70-year reign. She avoided it. She talked about the issues that you would expect someone to, about family. She came and spoke to us during COVID. She didn't get into politics. She got into the things that unite us. And he could do you more harm than good for your cause.
Yeah, but what he's actually doing this, and when he does it, and I'm pretty sure he will mention, because his words at the COP28, we are dreadfully far off track on climate. We're heading for a darker world. Now, look, it may be politics in one way, but he's the head of the nation in terms of his position, and for him not to do this is perhaps a worse option, if that makes sense. In other words, not to mention what is in his heart.
We have got plenty of people telling us, Jim. We got politicians galore telling us. By the way, I'm going to read something out that will warm your heart, Jim.
Go on,
hello, this is me. Nick, you keep telling us everyone is saying your viewers and listeners think King Charles is playing politics. Well, I didn't say everyone. I said many of you, many viewers and listeners, and the vast majority. And he does make a legitimate point here, Rob. We don't actually know that the King's speech is going to be party political. It's just been briefed. I'm not saying it's going to be party political. What I'm saying is, by talking about this issue, it is a political issue. There's a difference there, Rob.
Yeah.
But he does say... final point Rob is saying, Jim, and then I'll let you in. I think the King does a very good job, and I'd rather listen to what he's got to say than most politicians. I mean, OK.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's a view.
Yeah, because, you can side with politicians one way or the other, or go away from it. In other words, say that's a load of rubbish, etc. But I think that the head of state is a slightly different kettle of fish. I'll tell you what, a little funny thing here. The bookmakers usually say in the King's speech, if you mention a certain word, you can bet on it.
Yes.
Etc. I just take you up on that. We'll bet a pound. I'll bet you, OK, that he mentions the word climate.
Oh, he will. And that is the point. He's going to get into politics by doing that, even if he's not getting into party politics. It is. Look, we've just been talking about Labour's 28 billion commitment to invest in green initiatives, which is highly questionable because we're not sure if they're going to spend it or not at the moment. But that is a commitment, right? Now, the problem with that, Jim, is that's political. He starts talking about we have to do everything to save the world. A link from climate change, the link is immediately there. He's putting himself at risk of being accused of supporting Labour. That's not on for a king.
Well, maybe not. But as I said to you, it's an extremely important point. I'd say something to you, and that is, I'm sure he writes his own script, and if he doesn't write it, then he will certainly vet it right to the nth degree to make sure that you can read it in several ways, if that makes sense.
It's possible.
You can read it apolitically or politically, and I'm sure people will take their view of what he's going to say. But I go back to where I started in terms of where he's come from, and we knew this at the very beginning when his environmental awareness has been known for a long time.
Yes, it has. As Prince of Wales,
years ago,
he was the first. He was the first environmentalist. Jim, can you? Well, he wasn't quite the first, but Jim, can you? Would you bear with us because we're getting calls on this. I've got someone who just wants to make a point, and we can both respond to it. Shall we go to Ian in London? Hello, Ian.
Good afternoon to both of you.
Yeah. Happy Christmas, far away.
Happy Christmas. Now, the King should stay out of it. Now, how would Jim feel if we had Edward VIII back, who was pro-Nazi, starting lauding Hitler? It's all right if it's on his side, but if we have someone going to the other side...
Ian?
No, it's not acceptable.
Let me ask him. Let me ask Jim. Jim, if he said something you disagree with, how would you feel about that? We've lost Jim there. Can we hear Jim?
That kind of extremist political view will never be spoken by King Charles. And I don't say that as an anti-royalist in any shape or form, not a royalist, but at the same time, I go back to what I said. His speech will be looked over 100 million times, in other words, so he doesn't go to that kind of extreme. So I think what you're going to find tomorrow, that he will mention the environment, he will mention climate. It's the context of how he does that. And if he works very well at it, then he'll walk away and nobody will have a
Ian,
problem.
I think Ian's point to you is going to be, and I'll bring him back here. Okay, forget Nazis. It's always wary bringing that in. But Ian, isn't the point you're trying to make that, Jim, if he turned up and said this climate change, it's all total tosh, the government needs to start looking after the cost of living first, how would you feel about that, Jim?
No, I think that's treading too far. That is being
no difference.
Very pointed. No, there's a big difference between looking after the environment, which is, the climate's in there. There's other clean rivers, etc. There's all of that goes in there. I go back to the 90%. That's what 90% of people, look for.
Ian, okay, let me ask Ian something. Ian, do you think 90% of people are behind climate change and think that it's all worthwhile what we're doing?
I think 90% of people agree we need to improve the planet, but what we've got is a cult driving it, not people grounded in reality. And if Prince Charles or King Charles wants to do something, why doesn't he fly to Yemen and say, stop bombing people? That'll help the climate. He wants to do something worthwhile, rather than going about trees and compostable Christmas decorations. He's living in a world of privilege and unreality.
Jim, I mean, he's got a point. Anything we do here on climate change is just not going to make a difference, is it? So why do we persist?
Yeah, well, because you persist. And when he talks about cults. I mean, is NASA, is NOAA, are the Met Office, WMO, are all of these cults? These are
no, but it is an industry. It is an industry, isn't it? I mean, climate change is a business now. People are making a huge fortune out of it. Look at COP. They were busy doing deals in COP.
Nick, in exactly the same way, oil and fossil fuels have been a business since the first time they've been discovered. A multi-billion-pound problem that we've now inherited as on the planet Earth, and that's what we're trying to move towards, to phase out, not to get rid of tomorrow. That's stupidity, but to phase out so we can live in a cleaner, greener world that, as I said to you, the vast majority of people want. And although this station may well be, the listeners may well have a problem with what we're saying, I suggest a little bit of, and I say this with all humility, but a little bit more a little bit more education would take people a long way in terms of what's going on around the world. 2023 says it all. 2024, a little prediction for you as we're getting near New Year. Worse still. Okay,
Jim, let me just pick up on one point, because I'm sure you didn't mean this, but it always comes over as patronising when you say people need to get educated to agree with me.
I said with humility.
Well, I know you said it with humility. I'm talking about how it comes over, OK? Because the reality is, one of the reasons I have people like you, Jim, who hold a contrary view with many of the people who communicate with this show, is so that we can always challenge and examine other people's views.
Fair.
But I can't really sit here and say, hey, come on, never mind humility or not, get educated until you agree with me. I think that's a mistake politicians make. So can we happily agree to agree that wasn't your intent, and I wish you a very happy Christmas for no other reason. And thank you for coming on, Jim. I always enjoy our discussions.